Good morning, I'm Jason Ellis, and this is Tech Avail News. Today is Thursday, April 22nd. We have actually a lot of really interesting news to get through, so here are your top headlines from yesterday to know going into your workday today. To start us off, Disney Plus just continues to nip at the heels of Netflix. They have just announced that all of Sony Pictures' upcoming theatrical slate and a lot of its library will be heading to Disney-owned streaming services and linear TV networks. This is all very similar to the Netflix deal that we just talked about, where Netflix is getting the pay one window of Sony Picture theatrical releases starting from 2022 to 2026. So what is happening is once that window for Netflix closes, all of those titles will go into the pay two window onto all of Disney's streaming platforms. This is actually very interesting because Disney has so many different outlets that they can really utilize these tentpole pictures, specifically Spider-Man and Venom, part of the Marvel Universe, onto their different distribution outlets. So they have Disney Plus, Hulu, ABC, Freeform, a lot of different versions where they can then cater these Sony pictures for the best audience, which is just going to help drive more eyes and subscribers to their platform. So just very fascinating how Disney is going, okay, Netflix, we see you, we got you, we're following you, and we'll follow up and keep at you. So see this competition heat up is actually really fun to watch. And I will say, this is probably a very obvious signal that Sony is not going to be creating their own streaming service, specifically if they just made these deals for 2022 to 2026 pictures, not going to their own personal platform. So that's an interesting stance from a massive conglomerate to not take. So we'll see what happens, but I love the story. I love seeing big companies rival each other. I think this is actually a really fascinating story and a really positive story. UCLA, who just released their 2021 Hollywood Diversity Report. This is written by sociologists Darnell Hunt and Anna Christian Ramon, and they are essentially saying 2020 was a watershed moment for representation across all diversity and women. This is just really fascinating to read. So it's what they do is they analyze the top 185 feature films, English language films released in 2020, and they have found a lot of interesting moments. Just keep in mind, this is not TV. They will release their TV report end of this year. This is purely for feature film representation. But a lot of upside. So we'll start off. So the Black population share of all speaking roles rose from 19.4% from 15.7% in 2019. This is very much above the U.S. population of the Black population, which stands at 13.4%. So they are now. The population is now represented more than the U.S. population. People of color in general account for 40.3% of the U.S. population, and that has now exceeded on-screen representation at 42% of all roles. Other positives were the Asian community was up to 6.5% from the 2019 report of 5%, and they do, population-wise, account for 6% of our population. Multiracial representation is now at 8.5%, up from 6.2%, and they actually make up less than 3% of the population. So this is a fantastic show of representation. I will say a couple of diversity cultures that need to be represented more. The Latinx community was cast in 5.7% of films, which is up from 4.6%, but they do make up about 18% of our population. So the Latinx representation needs to really pop up a lot more. MENA is at 1.3% in 2020, up from 0.7%, and they make up around 3% of the population. So once again, the MENA population almost needs to double on representation. Native American is at 0.6%, up from 0.5%. And also need a bigger boost because they are 1.5% of the U.S. population. Essentially, all races but white, but the white race has shown gains compared to 2019. So I want to make sure I'm getting this all right. The white representation is down to 58%, which was at 67.3% in 2019, and the U.S. population of white identifying people is 60% of the population. So across diversity, we're seeing the black population doing very well, the Asian population improving. Latinx, MENA, and Native American need to be bolstered a lot more. And it's interesting to see now that now that the more diversity is coming out, the white representation is starting to close the gap as well. For women in general, it has been a fantastic year for them. They now account for 47.8% of being leads in feature films. This is up from 44.1% in 2019, and really up from 2011, where it was 25.6% of representation. And then across board for directing and writing, women and diversity has really popped in there. I mean, women have now made strides going up to 20.5%. So across the acting, directing, and writing, the UCLA report is showing that a lot of positive strides have been taken. They are putting a slight asterisk because 2020 is such a unique year, and a lot of these releases are actually not from 2020 making. They're from previous releases that are coming out. So they're going to say, hey, are we keeping this as a pattern, or is this a unique year of representation? So I think the next report is really going to be proven, going, okay, this is a positive pattern, or it is actually a fluke of a year. So we'll see what comes out in the next year. From what I can tell, especially in the casting space, the diversity quota is definitely on the upswing, and we'll see, I would say, more coming out, especially for the MENA community and the Asian American community. And I will say Native American. I've been seeing a lot more Native American-based projects. So I think these representations of numbers on screen to U.S. population representation is going to start to equal out a little bit more than they have been. And as we see, the black population is now overly represented in a good way, according to the U.S. population. So interesting report. I'm very curious to see how the TV report shows this as well, because TV, I feel like, lends itself to A, more roles, but B, a lot more representation of diversity. Paramount Pictures names Micah Price as SVP of production for its motion picture group. She is going to be reporting to co-presidents Darius Sirstick and Michael Ireland. Micah was previously head of development at Don Cheadle's production company, The Radical Act Productions. I have heard, just be honest, I've heard mixed things about Micah. I do not know her, so I'm not here to judge by any means, but it is interesting going from a actor's vanity shingle to a massive SV role. But you know what? I don't know her. She could do fucking fantastic for all I know. So best of luck. And I think it could be a very potentially great hire for Paramount. The massively popular reality franchise Below Deck is continuing its dominance by announcing 2 new spin-off series. NBC Universal is in early stages of having one set in Australia and another spin-off series to be set in Iceland. If you don't know what this is, it's essentially a reality show that follows a yacht crew, and every episode a new amount of guests come on board, and they do it's usually like a 3 to 5 day tour of wherever they are. It is actually very entertaining because you're watching the dynamic of young, sexy 20-somethings, and then like the usually older captain being like, what the fuck are these kids doing? Plus the new guests who come on board. This may be something that will most likely, I would assume, also be on Peacock because of the immense popularity of the franchise. It would be very silly for Peacock not to also have this on their platform. CBS Studios has re-upped Craig Sweeney's deal with them. They are now doing a brand new 3-year overall deal. Sweeney is the creator behind Limitless and The Code, and from what I could tell, he's essentially been with CBS Studios for his entire writing career. He made their first deal with them when he was a writer on the original 4400, and that was about 17 years ago. So not a surprising re-up. I will say it would be a little bit interesting to bring on new overall deals from not such safe writers, but Craig Sweeney is also a staple for them, so why not? All right, I'm going to be a little snarky about this one just because I'm a massive How I Met Your Mother fan. Hulu has announced that they are doing a straight-to-series order of a spinoff called How I Met Your Father, and they are having this one star Hilary Duff. pretty much essentially playing the Ted Mosby role. Isaac Aptaker and Elizabeth Berger are going to showrun this. And I think Aptaker and Berger are very good writers. Craig Thomas and Carter Bays are back as executive producers, so hopefully they do have a solid amount of say to kind of keep this in the sweet spot that How I Met Your Mother was. I'm hesitant because they have already tried 3 times to make this. 2014, they failed with How I Met Your Father with Greta Gerwig and Drew Carver, which even when that happened, I was going, what the fuck? What is this casting? 2.5 years later, Aptaker and Berger actually did come up with a take and started to move forward, but they got promoted at This Is Us, so essentially had too much on their plate to do that. And then 20th tried in 2017 with You're the Worst with a spinoff from Allison Bennett, and that also didn't work. I like Hilary Duff. I don't know if she works with this because she's essentially almost too big of a star. I think How I Met Your Mother really worked because we didn't really know these actors, and you just kind of fell in love with the comedy, the relationship, and who they were. Yes, we knew Neil Patrick Harris, and we knew Allison Hannigan, but they were in such different roles that we'd never seen them do before, especially Neil Patrick Harris. I'm hesitant. I'm not counting it out, but How I Met Your Mother, for me, is one of my favorite comedies, so I really just don't want them to fuck it up and then, bring it down to what it was. Antoine Fuqua will direct and produce a film adaptation of the Tennessee Williams play Cat on Hot Tin Roof. This is actually going to be based on the 2008 Broadway production that featured an all-black cast. The Broadway production did very well, especially when it did its West End run. It won an Olivia Award for best show. I love this idea. I think Fuqua is an interesting director for this because I view him much more in the action space, from The Equalizer and Magnificent Seven. So having him do Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, we'll see, not counting him out, but not really going, oh yeah, Fuqua, theater, got it. So we'll see. A couple of biopics are also in development, so we'll start off with the first one. Disney is revitalizing their development of a Jim Henson biopic. They have now brought on writer Michael Mitnick. He is taking over writing the previous duties from Adrift writers Aaron and Jordan Candle. Mitnick wrote The Current War and The Giver, which honestly, I'm questioning bringing Mitnick onto this project. Current War was fine. I didn't think it was anything special. And The Giver, to me, destroyed a timeless classic. So I'm hesitant. But I do love the idea of a movie about Jim Henson because it's really centering in on Henson's journey to convince broadcasters that The Muppets was a good idea and how he worked to create this new universe for children's television. So I love this concept. I'm curious on how Mitnick does executing it. And for the other biopic, Mark Gordon Pictures and the husband and wife writing team, T. Cooper and Alison Glock Cooper, are creating a biopic chronicling the life of Fallon Fox. And if you don't know Fallon, she is the first openly transgender MMA fighter. This is obviously very timely right now because what happened with Fallon was she was fighting in the women's circuit of the MMA, and then eventually, which is something that she dreaded, a journalist threatened to out her that she is a trans woman. So instead of letting this journalist take advantage and blackmail her, she said, fuck it, and came out. So it created obviously a controversy because you're going, it is a man, turn transgender woman fighting against women. So, I'm curious how they're going to handle this, but it's a very important story to tell right now, especially because 34 states are currently considering legislation that would ban transgender girls from interscholastic sport teams, and 5 have already done so. So you see, Tennessee, I want to say Florida, joined already Idaho, who did this back in 2010. So fantastic story to tell. Very curious how it's executed, and also very curious who's going to play the role of Fallon, because that is a very unique casting, but cool concept. I'm very curious to see this, how this comes out and it plays out. All right, those are our top headlines. I found them very fascinating. I especially love seeing analytical data coming out, especially for diversity. So we go, hey, how are we doing? But I'm Jason Ellis. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Tomorrow's Friday, so I'll see you bright and early then. See you later, guys.